gonna start the OBS recording and sharing screen. All right. So we're gonna be starting with Microsoft Paint, the ultimate teaching tool. So I'm just kind of gonna go over core concepts and essentially the thought process in building this out. So I've already pretty much finished it, but I'll start I'll do a new one. Let me just make a new folder in here. Demo index.html style.css. So most of this I'm kind of trying to address what's been like lacking in the curriculum, which is like core concepts, and like looking at a template and deciding like how things build on each other. So when I'm looking at this template here, first thing I see is that this is the whole display. This is the body essentially. So and then within that, we're gonna have the main container, and then within that, so basically everything, think about like building a house. You start with the foundation, you start with the base level, and everything gets stacked on top of it. So you've got containers, and then you've got elements on top of them, or you've got sub-containers that are on top of them. So starting with the body, we've got this like background color here, but then we've got the main container, which is like containing all of the main content here. And then maybe we would start with we could start with the header here. So this is its own container. And then inside of that, we've got like this. You've got the left side here and the right side here. So this top section is probably going to be its own container, and this bottom section is probably going to be its own container. And then down here, we would have, this would be like the main content container, and we would have main content left and main content right, and then we would have like something like this, and another container that's pretty much identical to it below that. Because notice the design elements of these elements and these elements, the employment and education, are the same. So we're likely going to use classes for those elements and just generalize the styles. So let me just start by building out like the main architecture. So we're going to do one div. I'm going to call it main container. And, oh, where's my cursor? So main container, like I said, is this. It's not the body. It's not the whole thing. It's just where all the main content is going to be housed. And then I would probably do something, let's just start with the header. So I'll call this, header container. And inside the header container, I'm probably going to want header. I'm probably going to call something like header container top and header container bottom. Or I'll just call it header bottom. Let's do that. So basically what I've done is created the boxes I'm going to need for the main container. I've created the header container right here. Header bottom is probably going to be this with the gray text, and header top is probably going to be two sub-containers, one on the left side for the like bio and one on the right side for like contact information. So for the header top here, I'm going to create two smaller divs, and I'm going to call it header top left and header top right. So kind of like if you're thinking about like Photoshop, or if you're thinking about just kind of any template rendering where you have things that are building on top of each other, you always, with HTML, you start from the bottom up. You get the basic architecture, starting with the body, then the main container, then the larger categories of where you're going to house your elements. And so everything kind of builds on top of each other. And so that's where this idea of like nested elements comes in, where header container is a child of the main container, and header container has two children, header top, header bottom. Header top has two children, header top left, header top right, and header bottom is probably just going to have lorem text. But let's start with the header top left. So we can start just by filling in some of the main content. I'm just gonna leave this blank for now. And what I would do is probably do like an H1 with, the name. Let's do Sarah Jefferson. You can also write this in lowercase. There's a CSS property to text transform anything lowercase to uppercase. And I think actually what I'll do is this little subheading here, I'll keep it inside the H1, but I'll put it inside a span. And that way I can specify, I'll call this like ID subheading. And okay, I'm going to close this out now and start a live server so we can kind of follow along on the screen. So let's see. I'm going to close these other ones and open up my styles. So I'm going to do first things first, CSS Reset. So almost every element in HTML has like default styles associated with it, and that can get a little bit tricky. So I just start with margin 0, padding 0, and this selector is just for all elements, and box sizing border box. Then I'll give body background color, let's just call it black for now. Oh, and I still have to link my style sheet. Nice. And then I will give the main container. One thing you can do if you want is you can use a color picker. I don't know if Paint has that, but if you just Google like this, I use this website, image color picture. You can, or image color picker. You can upload an image and then just pick a specific pixel out of it. If you want to do it that way, I can upload this. Let me save the picture here, and then I can upload it right here, and then I'll just use this little magnifying glass and pick the background color. And so for my main container, I'm going to do background color and paste that in. And then I will do, let's see, max width, let's say 75%. So this is a little bit responsive where we can kind of change things as we go. But basically, if I'm looking at the image here, I'm noticing that the main container has some, has some blank space on the edges. So we don't want the main container to stretch and fill up the whole page. And then one thing I'm going to do is just margin auto, which just evens out the margins on the left and right side, basically positioning things dead in the middle. And then I think one thing I will do if I'm looking here, I'm probably going to set a color or a font weight for P tags, so like this gray text color, and then a header text. So maybe I'll set here H1, H2, H3, color white. And then I'm going to target my span here, this subheading. So target my subheading, and I will say display block. And that's just going to make it take up its own line. Even though it's inside of the H1, I'm targeting this specifically, and I'm saying this is going to be block represented, which means if I look in here, it's taking up its own line. And the header itself has now grown to accommodate that. And then I'll do like color. What's that nice blue? Light sky blue? Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, and then, because I want this text to be a little bit smaller, I'll do font size smaller. And I'll just make it a little bit. You can get more specific with it and give it an exact font size by pixel or by reactive units that are called EMs. You can look into that. I believe EMs is just a ratio of the default font size for the website that you've set, or that's just predetermined by the browser. And then I think what I will do is, here I actually have my cover photo here, so I'll just link this media/cover photo, and this is usually best practice to keep like static images or any other like SVGs, any icons that you want imported, just keep it in a media folder, and then you can reference it with the directory. So then I think I'll select the header top left, and I'll specify the image, and then I'll style that in here. So header top left image, and let's just say width 150 pixels. Yeah, that'll be good. And then let's see. Oh yeah, so one thing I'm going to want to do is with header top left, I'm going to want to display flex. So just like I did display block here to tell it to take up its own line, there's another display property called flex, and this doesn't have to get too complicated. We're not using flex box for anything. Display flex will essentially create a row. It'll treat your div as like a row unless you specify it to treat it as a column, and it'll take those elements that you've put inside and put them left to right. So like nav bars that you usually see on the top are flex, where it'll just display the elements in a row. So then let me just go back to the template really quick here. So I think I'm going to want to add some padding to main container. Let's call it 5% because we don't really want these elements. So padding is basically just going to put some empty space between your elements and the border of the container. So that's basically a really safe way. You don't want to get too confused with adding padding or adding margins or specifying actual sizes for things to make things look right. It's a big trap that people fall into is they're like, oh, I'm looking at this. This looks like about 10 pixels away from the left, so maybe I'll do a margin left of 10 pixels. It gets really complicated, and the simplest way is you can, if you need everything off of the edges, you can just put a little bit of padding on the main container. Let's maybe call that 3%. And that way you don't have to do any tricky pixel math or any weird things that happen later on when you're trying to make it reactive. And I think I will change this image size to be a little bit smaller. And I'll just put my name in here since we're doing mine. If you want to, we can do header top left h1 text transform uppercase. If you want to do it that way. Also, I think I'm going to do a new font family, which you can do in the star selector here so that everything has the same font. That's ugly. Alright, fine. And then, let's see. What can we do here? I think what I will do with the image is just give it a margin right of, let's say, you could do it maybe 5%. That might be a little bit too much. Let's call it 4%. I don't like working with pixel values too much. I try to avoid it unless it's like a really tiny thing where you want to push something over like 10 pixels. Because when you're working with percents, it's working with the size of the container, which is usually based on the viewport width. So notice things aren't fixed width, and no matter what the size of the viewport is, I'm not getting that horizontal scroll bar where elements are floating off of the visible screen. So that's why we're trying to work with like responsive units or relative units instead of exact values, and that makes things a lot easier when you're trying to make things iOS or like mobile responsive. All right, let me go back to the image here and just see what else we want to build out. Okay, so for this right side here, I can probably start working on that. So in my HTML header, oh, I think I called this the same thing. Header, this is supposed to be header top right. And then if I'm looking closely here, it looks like we're probably going to take this top right here and put two smaller elements because they're aligned on this. Oh, okay, they're like aligned on this like axis here, where the things on the left are text aligned to the right side, and the things to the right side are text aligned to the left. Otherwise, you would get like based on the length of the strings here, it would kind of not be lined up on a central axis. So I think what I'll do is two more smaller divs. I'll call them header top right. Let's just call it info left and info right. And then with this header top right, we're going to be flexing this parent container. So the header top right, this whole thing we've got going on here, is going to be flexed because we want things on the left and on the right. So we're going to call this header top right display flex. And let's just see what that does really quick. Oh, I still have to add some stuff in there. So header top left, I'm just gonna do p tags, name. Just copy this. And I don't know, blah. So, okay, let's see. So our header top right is currently displaying underneath, and we want this to be flexed. So our header top right, the parent of header top left and header top right, we want to flex these so that this whole block of elements and this whole block of elements are in the same row, and they're displaying them side by side. So the parent of header top right and header top left would be header top. So let's specify our header top element and display this as flex. Now these are going to be side by side. And if you want to do inspect, it kind of helps. So it takes the header top and it takes the first element and puts it on the left side and the other element on the right side. And these are p tags, so they're going to take up their own line by default. So we won't need to do a flex direction column or anything like that. But for these, I do want them to all be aligned from the right side on the same axis, like at this here, where there's white space on the left side, but on the right side they all line up to a common center. So I think what I will do there is justify content right. No, maybe not. I could just do text align right. And that'll just push everything, push the white space to the left and push everything to the right. And then info right, I'm going to do another set of p tags. And then for info right, we still got to do a little bit of styling. So let's do, or maybe, what's the, let's see, we've got header top right, which houses info left and info right. So I think what I will do is instead of text align right, that's kind of messy, we'll do justify content center. And then in info left, I will text align to the right, and info right. Actually, text align is by default to the left, so that should be fine. And then let me just, I want justify content center. Maybe I'll actually space between. So why is there no margin happening here? So we've got info left, info right, and they're right next to each other. So yeah, maybe I could just add some margin there. But with space between, it should be trying to put as much space between these two things as it can. Let me just double check that I've applied that to the right property. So I've got header top right, info left, info right. Space between, yeah. You could, but typically speaking, if there's no content to display, you want to avoid having an empty element. It's better to kind of do that with You could do margins, or you can do flex properties like space between. So I think what's happening here. Yeah, a break element would be it would just be a horizontal line break. If I put that in between these two divs, I don't even know if it would do anything. Yeah, it won't display anything, but oh, interesting. Yeah, so the line break has no properties until you put something in it, and the same would go for an empty element. I could theoretically just put another div here and call it like empty, but let me just go back to before really quick. Let me just consult what I did before. So for header top right, I display flex, and I just put a little bit of margin right. I called the info left in this other project, I called it white text, but info left, I'll just do a margin right. What, let's call it 0.75 em. So that's like 0.75 of a character width, basically. So that's based on like the font size. And then I'll do color white because on the info left I want the text to be white. And then let me just set a default for paragraph text. I want that to be like a light gray. Maybe something else. Dark gray. That'll work. So if I'm, yeah, okay. So if I'm setting the global P color here, I'm actually going to have to override that not through this, but through a more specific selector. So if you already have like a global, like all my P tags are supposed to look like this, you can't just set the color in the parent to override that. You have to specify the paragraph tags inside of info left. And then, let's see. That looks pretty good. I think we can move on to the bottom part. I mean, if you want to get more specific in the in here, this would be like a website, and you could set this blah at the bottom to an A. Actually, yeah, let's do that just for the sake of. I'm gonna set this to my GitHub URL. Because styling A tags is pretty important because they look ugly by themselves or by default. https://github.com/Hamilton, and then so yeah, looks pretty ugly. Don't like it. So what I will do is maybe I'll just do a global styling. I could select the container and select the A tag within it to be more specific that I'm talking about this link, but all the links look ugly, so I think I'm just going to do this. Text decoration, none for A tags, which gets rid of the underline and like the weird like pop-up stuff when you hover over it. And then I'll do color, I'll set that to this same blue that I used before. What was whatever, light sky blue or light sea green. Let's try that. Yeah. So now we're just setting a color there, and then I can also, if I want to indicate that like, hey, you can click on it, even though the cursor does that by itself, which you can change too. You can make it so that when you hover over it, the cursor is just a regular cursor and not a clickable. But for now, I'll do a hover and then text decoration underline, and that way, when I hover over it, there's a line under. So that's how we kind of reset the default styles with text decoration none. And then we can just change the color, or we can specify hover, and it'll add those properties to the A tags. And this is bothering me, so I'm going to change it to light sky blue. Alright. Now we can probably move on to the header bottom. So in here, if you have Emmet, I just like to do like lorem 65. It'll just generate 65 characters of lorem text. Oh no, I haven't seen that. Alright. And then I think for header top, I'm going to do a little bit of margin bottom because I want to space everything out. Let's call it 5%. See if that is what we want. Yeah, that's probably good. 5% there. And then also, why is this? Oh, I didn't wrap this text in a p tag. I was wondering why it wasn't gray, because I specified the color for the p tags. So we've got a little bit of margin to keep the top container away from the bottom container, and then also in the image that they give us, see right here, Control++, it looks like they've got a little like line here. Actually, that is going to mess us up a little bit, because what I would want to do is on my header top, or actually on my header container, I would want to do like a border bottom. Let's just call it gray for now. Oh, that's right, because we can't really see it because there's no elements beneath that. Yeah, I'm just thinking a little bit about that. You could technically do a block level element if you wanted to, so that it would take up a whole line, and you could do a border bottom on that. But this is kind of just a shortcut because we're just bordering the container itself. And actually, because I want this line to hit the edges, I'm actually going to take the padding out of the main container. And then I'll just add some padding on, let me think. I could do it on header container. See if this works. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, the padding adds size to the element itself, which is why this border expands as well with it. So before I had the padding in the main container, which added space in the main container but didn't change the size of the header container, which is why this line wasn't going all the way to the sides. It was filling up the header container, but the header container had white space on the edges. So yeah, now I just got that padding in the header container and the border bottom there. And maybe I'll just like delete a little bit of this because that's like a little bit too much text. Whatever. It's fine. Now we can move on to, let's see, outside of the header container. So I'm going to scroll down here. Outside of header container, I'm going to create a new div that's just going to be main content. So if I go back to my MS Paint masterpiece, main content is going to be everything below the header. So it's going to have this left side with the two employment and education, and this right side, which is like a column. And so again, we're going to use flex for that. So I'll do div main content left and main content right. So let's do this. So main content, since we're going to be doing that left and right side thing again, I'm going to flex that as well. Display, flex, and then let's just add some stuff. So we're not really going to be looking at this for a little bit. I'm going to focus on main content left, which is all this: employment, education. So I'd say there's probably the header here, this employment header, and I'm going to want to add some custom styles to that. So maybe I'll just give that its own div. I'll call it main content left header, or I'll call this main sub content, and actually I'll change this to a class, and I'm just gonna duplicate this. So main sub content is going to be this employment box and this education box, which is why I gave it a class and I put two of them, because I want these to share common styles. Since they look pretty much identical, I would just want to go in and change these colors to green. So main sub content, I could probably just do an H1, and I'll just do a little span here for the pointer. I'll just call this ID pointer, this little down caret thing. I guess one way you could do it is just like with a character like that, and then I'll specify first I'll do, what was it called? Main sub content H1. Yeah. So main sub content H1, I'm going to give that a background color of like a light gray. Oh, actually, I think I have light gray as the background color for my main container, or something close to it. So I will give this just a gray. That's interesting that this H1 isn't block. Oh, you know what? It's because main sub content. Yeah, don't worry about that. That's just because we haven't filled out the rest of the elements. So I'm going to give this a background color. What is my background here? I'll just give this like a background color of blue for now. Or not. Hold on. Main sub content H1. Oh, you know what it is? I gave that a class, and I'm using the hashtag selector. I need a dot selector for the classes. That'll work. And then I'll select the pointer, and I'll just do like background color light sky blue. Let me just fix that there. Okay. Light sky blue. I'll just give this like a width of like 25 pixels. 30 pixels. I won't worry about that right now. Let's do a transform, rotate, 0.5 turn. No? Transform, rotate, Just give me a second. I remember this was being a pain in the ass before, so I'm going to look at my other one. I gave it a div because spans are kind of weird. Yeah, I'll do that. So instead of doing a span, I'll just call this a div. Control D to select two at the same time. And then rotate 180 degrees. And then display inline. Oh, inline block. That's why. And then I'll give this a fixed width of 30 pixels and text align center just to put that right in the middle there. Let me think. So got the header set there. Let me So main sub content, I guess we can build this out. So I'd probably do another div for like each of these. Where's the box? There's the box. So I'd do a div for like these. I'll probably give this a class actually, since they're going to be duplicate. So this is probably going to have an maybe an H3 or an H2. Let's call it an H2. And then I'm just working off of the template here, so. And I think, again, I will do a span for the subheader here, director of department. And I'll just, I'll actually just give this the old ID I used of subheading, or whatever it was called. Yeah, subheading. Yeah, I'll do that. And then director, I'm gonna hold on. Let me just Alt-Z to format that so it's not running off the screen. And then let me just pull up this. No. This. There we go. One thing I think I'm going to want to do is for the main content, I'm going to put the same padding, 5%. That way, notice the white space up here is the same as the white space down here because we just set it to 5%, and that's going to be 5% of the parent. So whenever you're using percentages, it's going based on the percentage of the parent. So those are going to be the same. And then let me do this. Let me select my main sub-content H1. I've already got the background color here. I'm just going to put a margin bottom of like 5%. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then let's see. I can just start adding some text into here. Lorem 40. Yeah, that looks about right. And then I think I'll take my sub-content item and specify the H2 here. So that's going to be this. And I'm just going to put a little margin on the bottom of it. Is that a class? It might be a class. There it is. Little smaller. Let's do 3%. That'll work. And then I can just, since the these little subsections are basically identical, I'm actually just going to copy this sub-content item here and just paste in another one. And then also let me take the sub-content item container and just put a margin bottom on it. There we go. Space those out a little bit. And then let me think. Yeah, okay. So then I will do, I can just copy all of this. Right, is that right? No. Inside the main sub-content div, so here. Copy this and duplicate it. Now we've got that. And so these H1s are block level elements, so they are stretching to the end of the screen. However, when we put our sidebar in right here, they're just going to stretch to the edge of their container. So let me do, oops. Hold on, let me undo that and paste it here into main sub content because I gave those containers. And then we'll just do main content right, or we can just call this sidebar. But for now, I'm just going to do like an H3 and call it sidebar things here. And it's showing up on the right side because we did flex the parent. One thing I will do though is main content display flex, justify content space between. So if there's room, it should leave space between them. It's not doing that though. Actually, that's not doing anything. What I will do is just because they're display flex, it'll display the containers side by side, but I'll just put a margin right on that. Let's call it 5% again. See what that does. Oh, that puts the margin. The main content is actually everything below this line. It's a larger parent container. I'm looking for, let's see, main content left. So I want to put a margin right on main content left. Yeah, there we go. So that's going to leave a little bit of white space between the left side elements and the right side. And then let me think. There's a couple more things to do. Filling out some of this sidebar stuff. It looks like they want a date here, so I think I might flex. Oh, and they also want pointers, little icons, so maybe I'll do that too. So next to the title, I think, yeah, I'll just put another span in here. And put one of those in there, and I'll give this an ID of like pointer. Nice. Actually, I'll call this carrot. And then I'll just do another selector for carrot. Background color is going to be light sky blue. And I don't actually need to do my rotate thing because the carrots are supposed to be pointing right. But what I will do is a border radius 50%. And then I want to set the width to be like 30 pixels, or maybe 1 rem. Does that do anything? Because it's kind of an oval here, because the border radius, it's just because the span itself, the width it's taking up is just as much width as it needs to display that text, but the height and the width aren't the same. It can't be a perfect circle unless I start with a square. So let me think. Display inline block, and then width 30 pixels, and text align center. There we go. Not too bad. Inline block, basically block level elements are like headers. They will take up as much space as they can. They will take a full line. Inline block, inline elements will only take up as much space as the character requires. So that's like a default styling for span, which is why I had to override that with this display inline block, which inline block is kind of a hybrid of the two, where it will take up as much space as it needs, but you can also change that width to a specific value. And they will also function in line with other elements, so they're not going to push this H1 down to the next line. So then maybe I'll just add this carrot to the other ones. Yeah. And actually, no, because I want this header text to actually line up with the subheading text. So maybe I'll put that outside of it. What's that look like? And then maybe I'll put this whole thing inside of a sub-content item header div. And I will put the carrot in as the first element, the H2 as the second, as the whatever. To put the H2 in. Just for formatting reasons, I'm going to fix some of these. And then I think it wants a like a date of employment. So yeah, for this 2003 to 2007. So I think I'll do another H2 here, and I'll just call it ID, I don't know, gray header, because I want the text color to be gray instead of the default white that I have set for headings. And I'll just call it 2003, or I'll just, yeah, I'll just put 2003 to 2007 in there. And actually, I will copy this and replace the rest of these sub-content headers with this. So The reason I'm doing it this way is because eventually I'm going to flex this sub-content item header. If you want to take a look here in main content left, main sub-content. So this sub-content item header, I want to flex these. I want these all on the same line, and so I want the pointer to push the H2 to the right. So I will take my sub-content item header selector, and I will display flex. Let's see. Oh, that's a class. All right. Display flex. That messes that. All right. Then actually maybe I will move the caret back inside of the H2. And then, let's see. I also want to specify my gray text selector and just color gray, because I don't want these to be white. Why is that not? ID, oh, gray header. There we go. I'm wondering why there's no margin right here, and there's a little margin. Oh, I think it's just empty space. Yeah, I guess that's it. Okay. Let me think what else there is. Maybe we could start building out the sidebar. I mean, there's a little bit of work needed to like clean this up a little bit. I think I might actually change these gray headers to like H5 because that text is a little bit too big. And then also, why is it line breaking here? It's because of the flexed parent. Let me see what I did for this on my other project. Content main section header. I did a div with a caret and then another div for the, oh no, that's this. Let me think. Entry header, there we go. So the job, the title, so I did H2 with a span small text, and then another H2, and I flexed that. Okay. These carets are kind of bothering me for just the layout of things, so I'm just going to get rid of them for now. So the weirdness that we're running into with this is, I'm going to set this back to an H2. With flex containers, it's going to make the height uniform of the whole container. So when I flex this, it turns it into a row, and the reason it was trying to line break there is because the height of the container is really tall, but the width wasn't. So now it's working as intended a little bit. This line break that's happening right here, let's see, that would be this gray header here. So got an H2. So the sub-content item header is this whole flex container here. I want it to have this title thing and this, and I want them to be side by side. Yeah, so what I will do then for the styles on the sub-content item header is justify content space between. So this is going to push everything to the edge. It's basically going to put all the white space in between the two elements instead of putting them close together and leaving the white space on the right side edge. Yeah. I mean, for just the basics, this is kind of close enough. I mean, we could get into like specifically changing these colors to green, um, or just filling in a couple more details, but that stuff is a little more minor. Oh, is that a Bootstrap class? Oh, okay, yeah. So right now it's actually like loading an empty icon, or did I just grab the wrong one? There we go. But I thought that's what this was doing here, this content. I mean, I can download the SVG and I could put it in this media folder. Um, and then I could try to do, let me brush up on SVG import HTML. Oh. No, it's just basically saying, before displaying the content that's inside that element, display this content. So that's why I added a little like caret there, and it's just loading this empty box beforehand. So I don't know if I need to download that. There we go. So I just have to import their style sheet and then it'll work. But then one thing I would want to do is just select that and override the background color. The only issue I'm running into with it right now is I want this to be like on the left side, like outside of the flexed container, so that this line and this line is pushed to the right to be in alignment with this. Like I want everything to be on this common axis. So let me see. Um, yeah, they gave me a link right here. So it's just linking to their website and then wherever they're hosting this style.css file. So if I control click here, it looks like they've got a bunch of imported styles, and it's basically just like Bootstrap where you select a class and then it looks to the style sheet and says, okay, here's what we have for this class. Yeah, thank you, Yang Yang. Yeah, Font Awesome does that, or I know there's, if you're working with React, I use React icons or Material UI. But they have like a whole, you can browse their icons here, and then, oh, I want this one, and it'll just give you the JavaScript or React code to import that icon. Yes. hmm So, subcontent item is this whole box, and subcontent item H2 is targeting this. I just wanted to put a little bit of margin between. So, subcontent item margin 5% is responsible for this white space right here. Targeting the H2 is responsible for this white space right here. Yeah, so subcontent item is this box. And so I'm saying I want a little bit of margin below that, but also I'm going to go inside of subcontent item and select the H2, and I want to put a little bit of margin below that. So if you don't want to put a specific class or ID on an element like this H2 that I'm targeting, you can target the parent and then select the element itself, and then it'll apply that. Yeah, so there's a few more things we could do. One thing, I guess I will override the icon circle right style from the external style sheet and just give it a background color of like light sky blue. That'll probably work for me. Yeah, and then the only issue is that the icons are imported as a square and not as a like a rounded thing. I believe they're technically an image or an SVG. Oh, no, it's just pure CSS. So maybe I could do a border radius 50%, see if that works. Yeah, nice. Um, Sorry, where am I supposed to be looking? Yep. So yeah, I'm clicking on this span class, so it's just pulling up the styles that it pulled from that external style sheet, and it's just telling me what styles are being applied to this span. And then if I scroll down, these are also from my own style sheet. These are the styles that I overrode or just added some properties to it. Yeah, the inspector is also super cool because if you ever want to see like why something's not doing what you want it to, you can just change these. Like you could just get rid of this property and see what it does. delete a property, see what it does, or yeah, basically, once you refresh it, it'll go back to normal, but it's just like a local instance of the page that you're modifying in the browser. So you can kind of play around with things, and then once you find the right configuration, you can just take that code and put it in your source and finalize that change. Yeah, yeah, I think I could just delete main container and everything's gone. Or I could inspect this image specifically. Where did my inspector go? There we go. I could inspect the image specifically and just delete that and see what it looks like. Oh, that's interesting. So actually, that's a little bit of weirdness. So the image was creating just enough space for it, but without the image, everything floats to the left. So I think I'll do my header container. Let me see. Header container has header top. Okay, header top. I'm going to justify content space between. And that's going to keep all the white space in the middle and push everything off to the sides. If you do space around, it'll take all the white space and it'll take like a third of it and put it on the left side of the first element or on the right side. But basically, the amount of elements you have will determine like how many different ways it divides the white space. So space around will just take the total amount of white space and give an even amount on the left and right side of each element. Whereas space between will just push things off to the edges. Um, and that's what I was trying to do with this main content, where I flex this is going to be the left side, this is going to be the right side. If I make it like really big, actually I think what I will do though is main content. I'm gonna give this flex 1, and then I'll give this a max width of 75% because I don't want it to take up more than 75% of the screen. Oh wait, no, main content is housing everything. So main content left, I want 75%. And then if I make this really wide, that's kind of already doing that. Flex will do that for you. One interesting property that you can mess with is if you have a container that's flexed, so main content is everything below this line. You can specify to a child flex 1 or flex auto, or but basically it tells the container how much priority that element has. So if you have something that if you have a parent container that's flexed, you can tell one of the children flex 1, which will basically say give this element the most space it needs, and push everything else away, or make the other side smaller. That's helpful if you're trying to if you're creating a nav bar, but you want like a specific element at the end of the nav bar, and then you want white space all the way to the end. You can do that. But basically, yeah, that flex modifier is just telling it like how much space are you allowed to use. Yeah, yeah, actually, so if you want to basically float one of those links all the way to the right side, what you could probably do is flex 1 and then text align right. And that way that element will take up as much space as it needs, or it'll take up all the white space. And then the text from that element will just be floated to the right side. I'm not actually using float. I just mean when you're doing that flex one, it'll take up all the white space, and then the property you would use is text align right. So basically, your element that is housing the link itself will take up all the space it needs, and then the text that you put inside that element will be floated to the right. Yeah. And then I guess we could start building out the sidebar. Um, yeah, let's do that. So I wonder, why is this line breaking? So I don't want this div to take up so much space. So I could make the max width smaller, or I could take the sidebar and give that a flex 1. What is this? Main content right. Okay. Maybe, let's hope that works. I think I want this to take up a little bit more screen space, so maybe I will set a min width for main content right, and I'll set it to like 30% of the screen. Min width 30%. This is something to be careful of though, because we're going to have to override this when we want to make it mobile responsive. Because actually, what we are going to do when we make it mobile responsive is instead of making these flexed left to right, we're just going to go column so that any elements that we don't want, basically because if you have a really small screen size, it looks like this. So what we would instead do is just, instead of having things on the left side and right side, we would just have things top to bottom. So we would change the flex direction for all the containers to column so that instead of going left and right, it'll push those elements to below it. No, Bootstrap is just it's a big style sheet that you can import so that when you're trying to style things quickly, you can just add classes to your elements and it'll use default styles. But this is more of like a flex and CSS thing. It's a flex property. So if I actually set my main content, if I did a main content flex direction column, it'll start flexing things instead of left and right. It'll start flexing them top to bottom. Yeah, most of the time you're working on a nav bar or a sidebar like this, you're going to be using flex because you want elements to be aligned left to right, and it's really easy if you want to do it reactively because then you can tell it that, like, hey, if the screen is too small, just start pushing things down instead of displaying them left right. Yeah. Um, so if I can get rid of this flex direction column, and now it's back to being a sidebar. And then I think I'm going to get rid of this main content left has a margin of 5%. I don't want that. There we go. Yeah, I think that's why it was taking up too much white space. And then maybe I'll give this a max width of like 60%. And then if I justify content, now there's actually some white space to play with. So if I justify content space between, it'll push everything to the edge. The reason we've got some white space here is not because of the justify content, it's just matching the white space on this side. It's because we put 5% of padding on the main content container. So the borders are out here, but the elements can only be put 5% inwards. So start working on the nav bar here. Okay. So under programming skills, I would probably want to have, let me just take a closer look here at the sidebar. So I'd probably have a p tag, and then below it, I'd probably make this either a div, and then put a smaller div inside of it, and I might flex that or set the width of that to be 90% or 80%. Yeah, let's give that a shot. So I can do, let me just make this a div, a class of like sidebar or content right, just to reference the parent. This is kind of best practice naming convention in terms of classes and IDs, where notice like I have main container, header top left, header top right, header bottom, main content left, main subcontent item header. So it's just kind of making it readable and clear to understand for other people that might be looking at the code. But yeah, that's just a little bit about best practice for like naming conventions. But I think I'm going to do a little div for each of these little bars here, and inside the div I'll have a little paragraph that says WordPress, HTML, CSS, and then I'll do a div. So we'll see this. So I'll just call this like slider bar container, and then I'll do a p tag here, WordPress, and then inside that I'll do a div, and I'll call it slider bar, and inside that I'll do slider bar highlighted. So what that's doing is I'm basically just putting this div, this slider bar div, you can imagine as the whole bar, even the gray space on the edges, and then the inner div, slider bar highlighted, is going to be what is colored in here. So that's how we can get pretty specific with like what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take my slider bar, background color, let's just do white for now so I can see it. Also, where's that going? I guess since there's no content in it, I'll do a width 100% of the parent. Where is it going? Main content right. Slider bar container. And then I guess since there's no, I guess I gotta set a height of, let's say, 1 EM. So like 1 font size. And I can just set the background. Do you guys want to break for lunch? Otherwise, it's going to be like 5 to 10 more minutes just for me to finish up the sidebar items. Yeah, I'm good. I'm down to finish this. So the inner div here, I'm going to use a percentage. Basically, I'm going to say the inner div width is going to be 90% of its parent, which is this gray box. So if I set this background color to aqua. Should, no, okay. Let's see what happened. Slider bar highlighted. Oh, this also needs a height, and I'm going to set the height to 100%, which means it's going to fill the whole height of its parent, and boom. And then if I want to put some text inside the inner div, 90%, and then I can take the, I can set color to white so that the text pops out a little bit, and I could also do font weight if I wanted to. Hold on, I forgot a semicolon after color. Font weight, bolder, and then text align right. Push that text to the end there. And then all I have to do is copy these slider bar containers a couple times. Oh wait, no, just this. Copy that. Yeah, okay, so let me just use the inspector to help kind of visualize that a little bit. So, having a parent div and a child div, it will, let me see. So we're using the slider bar container here, which has inside of it this paragraph, and then it has this. So if I select this slider bar, which is the whole bar including the gray space, I have set the width to be 100% of its parent, which would be the container. So the container is taking up the full line, right? If I just look at this WordPress, since P are by default block level elements, they take up their own line. Basically, that's defining the size of the whole box. It's taking the size of the main content right container, and it's just using all of it. So this slider, the outer bar there, is taking up the whole width. And by the way, the reason I had to add height to it is because if there's no elements inside the div, it will have 0 pixels of height. And so it just won't display anything. You won't see anything. And then the inner slider bar, I get what you're saying about like how it should be breaking a new line, but it's just because it's inside of the parent there. If I put like an H1 in there, I think it would break a new line for it. It's because divs will just inherit the properties of their parent most of the time. But if I put like inside the slider bar, if I just put in like an H2, it gets really messy. But yeah, so basically what I'm doing is I'm saying this is the outer slider bar, so the highlighted and the gray, and then I'm taking the child and I'm just telling the child slider bar to only take up 90% of the parent's width. So if I change this width property here in the inspector to 20%, 30%, for 50%, you see what it's doing? Alright, before you guys start falling asleep on me, we can do, I guess if you wanted to, you could specify these with IDs so that you can change the colors on them and the specific percentages, but that's a little bit semantic and I don't want to waste your guys' time on that. What I will do though, since we've got like this box here, this box here and this box here. This would be a good example of a flex direction column. So main content right, I've got programming skills here. So actually I think I'm going to put all this inside of its own div. So I'll just call this ID equals programming skills, and I'll put all the slider bars in there, including the programming skills header I put there too. So now that's inside of its own thing. And then this line, follow it up. Yeah, so this is our sidebar container here. So inside of or right here, I'll do another one. I'll give it an ID of graphic skills, I guess. And then I'll do one more child for the sidebar, and that'll be... Dang, can't even see it anymore. That'll be language skills. And then this way, I can... I'll take the parent here, main content right, and I'll set that as a... do I have that here somewhere? Main, subcontent, subcontent, main content, right. I'm going to do display flex for the whole sidebar, and then flex direction column. And then if I go inside here, I'll just add in some content to kind of visualize it. Graphic skills and H3 language skills. So now it's kind of pushing things as columns instead of as like left to right display. It's going to be pushing things around as columns. And then I'll do a justify content space between, maybe, or yeah, that'll work. Yeah, that'll just kind of push all the white space, or maybe I'll do a space around. How about that? Yeah, that should be good. No, that looks ugly. Hold on. Instead of justify content, actually, I'll just stack them all inside of each other, but what I will do is select main content right, and then select div. So basically every element that's inside of the main content sidebar, I'll just give them a margin bottom of something pretty small, because this is one of those instances where for formatting reasons we just don't want to use the space between properties, and we just kind of want to give a little bit of empty space. There we go. That's not too bad. Thanks, Azib. Yeah, so I guess for this, graphic skills, this is under here, this is pretty simple. We've just got like a little color dot and then a paragraph, so I think what I'll do is just P Adobe Premiere or whatever. Copy this. And, Photoshop. But I will do a little span in the beginning, and I'll just call this gray, or, blue square. And I'll do the same thing here, but I'll call it something else so I can specify a different color. Green square, and then So inside the paragraph, I've got a span. I guess the span has no, maybe I'll just make it a div. So blue underscore square, yeah. And I guess I should flex the p tags here because I want two elements in them but side by side. So I'll specify graphic skills p. Maybe I'll just actually do percentages. I'll do 100% of... Oh, no, I don't want the width to be 100%. I'll do 1 EM as the width, just one character unit, and then a height of 100%. Oh, that's not right. Alright, we'll just do 1 EM there. And then... Yeah, graphic skills, specify the p tag, and I want to flex the p tag. Why is it not displaying on the same line here? Is it because it's a div? Yeah, it's taking up the whole line, so I want that to stop happening. Display inline block, because divs will automatically take up their own line unless you tell it not to. And then why is it still doing that? Is there a random p tag that I'm not seeing here? Inside of I could. Yeah, let's try that. There we go. Nice. Thanks, Jared. And then we can do a little justify content space between. I don't like that so much, so maybe I'll just add a maybe I'll just add on the squares here just a little margin right of 1 EM, 1 character unit. I'll do the same thing for the green square. Margin right, 1 EM. Nice. And then margin bottom 1 EM. Just to space those out a little bit. And then I guess if you wanted to just repeat, you can just copy these lines. Change the classes, add some different colors to it, whatever you want to do. And then what's all left? Language skills, I guess we've got these little rounded dots. Alright, we can do that. So I'll make a container for each of these little lines with the rounded dots. Dots container, and maybe I'll just put a little paragraph here that says English, and then a bunch of little span tags. And then maybe for unhighlighted, you could specify each of the ones you want highlighted, or you could specify all of them to be highlighted except the unhighlighted one. Because this one has like 4 of them highlighted, so I guess that's the way I'll do it. But in the dots container, let me just do a little side by side here. So we're working right here, dots container. I want this to be a display flex, because I want this paragraph tag to be on the same line as each one of these dots. And then I'll specify dots container span, and then width, say 1.5 em, height 1.5 em, background color blue violet, and maybe we'll need to do a display inline block. Oh, and then this would display a square, but we'll do a border radius 50% to round all the edges, make it a circle, and booyah. And then maybe I'll do a border 1 pixel solid gray to highlight the box that isn't highlighted, and then for the specify the unhighlighted box background color. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes, so I want 3 of them to be highlighted and this one to be overridden. So what's going on here in main content right, language skills, dots container. It's got 4 dots here. One of them is unhighlighted. What styles we've got going on here? Oh, I guess this is being overridden by this. So maybe if I put it above that. Will that work? No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah, I was just hoping to be able to only do one of them and unspecify the background color. That is a good idea. So I want, what am I doing? So I want dots, or no, I just want to specify unhighlighted. How do you do the dash important again? Like that? There we go. Yeah, nice. Oh yeah, and then we'll do a vertical align middle. Should, or not. I actually don't know how I would do that. Maybe I guess I could specify the p tag and just margin auto dots container p margin. No, because margin auto will do it horizontally but not vertically. Oh, it will do it vertically too. Okay. So then maybe margin right auto, or I'll do a margin auto and then margin left 0. That way it's flush against the left side of the container here. And then it pushes these away a little bit. And then maybe if I wanted to add just a little bit of margin on each of these, I could do like 0.5 EM, just half of a character space between them, maybe 0.1 EM. Find the sweet spot there. Then I can just copy these, boom, 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 and I can change the ID dots container, blue dots, purple dots, whatever, just to specify the colors. But I think that covers all the core concepts of this assignment. Yeah, I did.